everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel, and if you're new here, hello. My name is Urvi, I'm 26 years old and I live in New York City. In this video, I want to talk about the financial lessons that I learned in my 20s and that I think are really important for every 20-something to be aware of. I've been wanting to make this video ever since I started my channel because I don't see people my age talking about money as much as they should.
I'm uncomfortable with this conversation. We shouldn't be talking about money.
Why not? We talk about everything else.
Because I think it's really important for every 20-something to know how to manage their money effectively and efficiently. I want to make it clear that I'm not a financial advisor and I didn't go to school for finance, but all of the advice that I'm going to give you guys in this video comes from my own personal experiences and my research and should not be considered as professional financial advice. Just to give you guys a little bit of a background, I am originally from India, but I have lived in New York City by myself for over 3 years now and have been fully financially independent for the last 2 years or so. So everything that I do know about managing my own personal finances comes from those 2 years of, doing it hands-on. So get a laptop, get a book and pen, get a coffee, and just settle down, get comfortable, and get ready to listen because I think I have some pretty great tips in this video for you. And stick around till the very end because I think it just gets more interesting as the video progresses. The first financial lesson that I learned in my 20s is to budget. I cannot tell you how important it is to budget your spending and your savings. What this means is essentially auditing your expenses so that you know exactly where your money is going. When I started making money and being fully financially independent, I had to pay for rent, expenses, clothing, electricity, all of that. So initially I used this budgeting app called Mint. It lets you connect to all of your bank accounts, your credit cards, your savings account, etc. and just lets you see your money all in the same place. Now, if you're just starting off with budgeting, I think Mint could be a good app for you to experience and see if it works for you. Personally, for me, I just found that it wasn't as detailed as I'd like it to be, so I created my own spreadsheet where I kind of just group my spending into categories like rent, shopping, entertainment, etc. and I also like to drill down to the very details. Just to give you an example, if I'm shopping this month and I know it's going to be a heavy month in terms of shopping, or if there's something I want to buy, I will kind of just drill it down and put down where exactly I spent my money. So I'll say, okay, at Zara I spent this much money this month, and at Urban Outfitters I spent this much money, or I bought home decor from this store for this much money. And what this does is kind of just give me an overall picture of how much I've spent and where my money has gone. And if I see that I'm overspending in a certain category like shopping or entertainment or eating out and stuff like that, I can see this and I can plan accordingly as to where else I can make up for it by cutting down a little bit. And what the spreadsheet method has done is just to give me an overall view of my expenses, so I know exactly where I can cut down and where I can spend a little bit more without feeling bad about it. Another tip that I have is if you've just started making an active income where you have a full-time or part-time job and you want to start budgeting but you kind of don't know how much money you should be spending on things, I think the 50-30-20 rule can be a good starting reference point for you. What this rule says is that 50% of your after-tax income could go towards your necessities, and necessities could include rent, electricity, your Wi-Fi, your phone. And then 30% goes towards your entertainment. This could include eating out, subscription services like Netflix, etc., shopping and all of that. And then 20% should go towards saving and investment. Now, I don't think this rule is 100% accurate for everyone because it doesn't take into consideration particular income or your living situation or what kind of living expenses you have. So I would not take it literally, but it's just a good ballpark figure to see if you're going over in your necessity or in your entertainment category and if you need to put down more savings. So this could be a good starting point for you to think about budgeting and keeping track of your expenses. My second financial lesson would be not to spend too much money on rent. This may not apply to you if you live with family and don't have to pay for rent, etc. Consider yourself extremely lucky because that's such a huge chunk of your income, especially in a city like New York. If you do live in an expensive city and have to spend on rent, I would definitely say that you could compromise in your early 20s when you're still not married, you don't have any kids. I think this is a good time to make some adjustments, make some compromises in your living situation. You don't need to be living in the nicest neighborhood or the nicest house with a doorman, a gym, a pool if you cannot afford it and if it's out of your means. I have met so many 20-somethings here in New York whose rent is literally more than half of their paycheck, and to me this is crazy because you're spending most of your money on rent, and then you also have to spend on your other expenses like your phone bill, your electricity, your Wi-Fi, your heat, etc. And at the end of the day, you're just left with basically nothing because you're trying to spring for this fancy place that you cannot afford. And I don't think that that's necessary at all. If you can afford it, then by all means, but stay within your means, and you can definitely have roommates. I've always had roommates. That's how I keep my rent expenses down, and sometimes it can suck, but I think when you're in your early 20s you can definitely manage and not spend a majority of your income on something like rent, because that adds up and it can be at the end of the year a huge amount of money that you could have maybe saved some off. My third financial lesson was to start scrutinizing how much I'm really spending on eating out. Thankfully, I've been very responsible with money from a very early age, I would say. And I think that has to do with the fact that I grew up with those kinds of values where I wanted to be independent. I wanted to, provide for myself as early as possible, provide for my family as early as possible, and also not coming from a, extremely wealthy family or anything. I learned the value of money pretty quickly. So I've never been the person who needs to get Starbucks every other day or who needs to get $13 avocado toast every morning, which I'm very, very thankful for. Because if you add up just how much millennials spend on getting Starbucks every day or every other day, it will blow your mind how much that comes up to. Making your own coffee, making your own food, cooking for yourself is not only good for your health, but extremely good for your bank account as well. Now, this is not to say that you should never eat out, you should never go out drinking with your friends, you should never have any fun. No, I'm not saying that, but if saving is a priority for you and if you're trying to be responsible with money, it should definitely be on your radar to check up on how much you're spending on those going out expenses, because if you're not keeping track of these expenses, you don't even know how much they're adding up to, and you don't even know what percentage of your income is just being wasted on getting Starbucks coffee when you could be making your own coffee for less than half of that cost, and if that's really necessary or not. My next financial lesson is that I learned the importance of having a credit card to establish a good credit score. Growing up, I was always asked to stay away from credit cards, and credit cards were made up to be these big bad things that you shouldn't have. But I now know that that's very wrong. If you live in India, what is credit score here in the US is a CIBIL score for you. And here in the US, you actually require a good credit score even to rent an apartment on your own, or to have a landlord trust you with a lease, or to even get a car. And similarly in India, if you're trying to apply for a bank loan to study abroad, or to buy a house, or to get a car, they'll probably look at your CIBIL score and see if it's at a good level. And to have a good credit score, you need to have credit cards, because without credit cards you do not have a credit history, so there's nothing to go off of. And this is why it's important to have at least one credit card. Now, this doesn't mean that you get a credit card and max out the limit and get stuck in credit debt and don't have the money to pay for it, and you're still making all these purchases because you have credit. I treat my credit card just as I would treat my debit card. Every month, I only make as many expenses on my credit card as I can pay off in full at the end of that month. If you're buying things on your credit card and you don't really have the money for them in your bank account, then you're making a mistake, because that's a slippery slope and you can slip into credit debt very quickly. And credit card debt is horrible because the rates of interest are really extremely high, anywhere between 18 to 24%, and you do not want to get stuck paying that kind of interest on a credit card just because you decided to buy a $5,000 bag that you cannot afford. Number 5 is to have a savings account that would also act as your emergency fund. I said this in my last video. As 20-somethings, you don't think that anything major can happen in your life where you'd need an emergency fund, but you couldn't be more wrong. Just take this year for example. No one expected a pandemic to happen. No one expected so many people to lose their jobs. And in times like these, if you don't have an emergency fund to fall back on, it can really affect your living situation. You should definitely have 1 to 3 months of salary saved up in a savings account and just forget about that money, because that's an emergency fund. You do not have access to it unless you have an emergency and you really need it. You should not be touching it. You can even build up that savings account to go from 1 month to 3 month to even a 6-month salary, or even more than that if that's what you want to do, because it's always good to have something to fall back on when you need it. I unexpectedly lost my job last year, and if I didn't have a savings account or an emergency fund to fall back on, I would have actually had to again depend on somebody else to pay for my expenses like rent and food, etc. And even though it wasn't a very long time before I got another job, I was at so much peace knowing that I had that money to fall back on and that I could pay for my expenses on my own while I was looking for another job. A pro tip here would be to find a high interest savings account to put your money in, so that you keep earning interest, and as much interest as you can on the money that is sitting in your emergency savings account. There are a few top banks out there that give you a higher rate of interest. Of course, this year that has changed a little bit because the banks have reduced their interest rates given that the economy is down, but there are still some banks that are paying you a slightly higher rate of interest than you would make in an average savings account. So definitely try to find those accounts and put your money in there so that your money is making money and it's also getting adjusted for inflation. My 6th and most important life lesson would be the miracle of compounding interest. Now, if you only take one thing away from this video, let it be this. Please learn about compounding interest. Compounding interest is when you earn an interest on your interest, which means when you save money and you earn interest and you reinvest the interest that you made, even that interest starts making more interest. At the age of 21, if you started investing $100 a week, assuming that you were making an 8% interest rate on that investment and reinvesting your dividends, then by the age of 65, you would retire with $1.9 million. Versus if you did the same thing at age 30, then you would only retire with $917,000. Now that's $1 million difference right there. And that's on compounding interest. It literally blows my mind. The longer your money has to grow, the higher the return is. So if you're in your early 20s, this is the best time to start if you haven't already. Number 7, I learned what a 401k is and what the importance of contributing to one is. If you don't live in the US and you don't know what a 401k is, let me explain it to you. A 401k is an employer-sponsored pension account, and you have these in India and other countries as well. It just might be called something different, where every month a certain amount comes off from your paycheck and is directly contributed into a pension account. And this may or may not be matched by your employer. Some employers in the United States will say, hey, if you contribute up to 5% from your salary towards your pension account, we will match 5%. So if I was to contribute $100 every month from my paycheck and my employer was to match that $100, then I'm basically getting $100 of free money that's being invested for me. So why wouldn't I take advantage of this? You'd be surprised as to how many people I have met who haven't even started their 401ks despite their employers matching their contributions. And I think this is a very, very big mistake because you're literally throwing away free money. So if you have an employer that is matching your 401k, then you should be at least contributing to the maximum amount that they're willing to match, so that you're not throwing away any of that free money that you're getting, because that's literally again going to add up. When you retire, it's all going to be a huge chunk of money just by making small contributions or small cuts to your paycheck. Even if you don't have a full-time job or an employer that provides a 401k plan, you can always get a Roth IRA and do this on your own, where you again put down a certain amount from your paycheck into a savings or an investment fund where your dividends are also reinvested, so that when you retire, you have a lump sum amount that you can take away. Lesson number 8 is the importance of diversifying your income and having passive income. There's 2 types of income. There's active income and there's passive income. Active income is when you're making money in return for a service or for an effort that you're providing. So basically your full-time jobs or your part-time jobs that require you to perform a service in exchange for income is your active income, versus passive income is basically money you're making with little to no effort. If you have money in a savings fund and it's making interest, then that interest is a passive income because you don't have to do anything. It's literally your money making some more money. So in your 20s, I think it should be your goal to start making passive income as early as possible and try to build your passive income out till it can be a sizable chunk of your overall income, so that if you do choose to take a break in your career, if you do choose to stop working for a little bit, you want to travel, you want to quit and start your own business, then you do have some sort of passive income and you know how much you're making every month from passive income, so that can be your source of security. Financial lesson number 9 is that I learned to stop making so many short-term purchases. Short-term purchases can range from, you're shopping, you're buying your clothes and bags and shoes, buying home appliances, buying home decor, which is not really going to serve you in the long term. And I definitely used to make a lot of short-term purchases, and it's always a vicious cycle because you always tell yourself that if you buy this one dress or if you buy this one bag, then you wouldn't want anything else. But this is just like a little kid trying to get the next toy and the next toy and the next toy. So there's always gonna be something that you want, but I think it's definitely wise to sit down and think about it than just going out there and buying something impulsively because you feel like you need to have it. If you do think that it is not necessary, then it would be great if you can put that money towards a long-term purchase or saving for a long-term purchase, like buying a house or buying a car or something like that that would serve you for longer in your life. Financial lesson number 10, and I think a lot of people forget to take this into account, and that is to avoid lifestyle creep. Lifestyle creep happens when you improve or increase your standard of living as your income rises, to the point that something that would have previously been a luxury for you is no longer luxury and has become a necessity or is being perceived as a necessity. Say you make $40,000 a year. Based on that, you've divided your expenses and you have this much money that you can put towards rent, this much you can put towards entertainment, etc. And then you get promoted or you change jobs and you're now making $60,000 a year. You immediately get a nicer house, you probably buy a car, you probably buy expensive gadgets because you can afford all of those things, to the point that they no longer seem like treats to you. Now they seem like a way of life and a necessity. And this is not to say that you should not improve your standard of living if you can afford it, but you should definitely be aware of whether or not you're being sucked into the lifestyle creep hole. Because with income increasing, what you can also do is increase your savings. If your expenses have gone up a little bit, also try to increase your savings a little bit to match that, and then you're good. My last financial lesson is to have a financial goal in mind. Now you can do all of these things, but if you don't have a financial goal or a reason as to why you want to save, a reason as to why you want to be financially independent, then it's not going to be as much fun. Your goal could be to buy your own house, buy a luxury car, or to retire early, or to travel the world, take a break, start your own business. Your goal could be anything, but I think having a financial goal in mind really motivates you to invest more, to save more, to start being more responsible about your money. And with all that, we have reached the end of this video. If you did stick around to the end, I hope you learned a lot of stuff that you didn't already know about that you can apply in your life. And if there's any other financial tips or tricks or lessons that you have learned in your 20s and have really helped you, please leave them in the comments below for me and for other people to read and learn from. Let's all start a discussion on healthy financial habits in the comments below. I will be hanging out there answering all of your comments. If you did find this video interesting, I would really appreciate it if you can hit the like button and share this video with a friend you think would appreciate this content, and also subscribe to my channel so you can help me grow and keep making these videos which are information rich so that it can add some value to your life. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you'll stick around and I'll see you in my next one.